All right, ladies and gentlemen, in this video, we're going to be talking about some apparent internal beef that's happening over at EA between the Mass Effect teams and the Dragon Age teams. Apparently, the Dragon Age team, or some people at that team, believe that EA is playing favorites and view Mass Effect as the more important property. Now, this might be for a multitude of reasons. This seems to be a thing that was even before Dragon Age the Veilguard. I'm sure if this was real, and if it is real, I'm sure it's exacerbated by the fact that Dragon Age the Veilguard was such a massive failure, but apparently this is a thing, and I wanted to talk about it. So let's get into this article, guys, from PC Gamer. But of course, before we do, if you are new here, just consider hitting that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it, and like the video to push us out into that YouTube algorithm. So it says EA has always preferred Mass Effect. Straight up, Dragon Age creator reveals that his and Mass Effect's teams didn't get along at BioWare, as EA played favorites with its children. Now, here's the thing, man. I can clearly see the differences in ideologies between Mass Effect and Dragon Age, right? Mass Effect remained very consistent throughout its entire universe, from 1 all the way to Andromeda, although Andromeda, for the most part, a lot of people have issues with, but 1 to 3 especially were very consistent in the way that it was showcased in its graphical style, in its overall storytelling, its overall combat and gameplay. Obviously, they refined it as time went on, but for the most part, fairly consistent. Dragon Age, all over the place. Dragon Age seemed as if it was made by a brand new team every single time, with no consistency throughout it whatsoever. Dragon Age The Origins versus Dragon Age 2 versus Dragon Age Inquisition versus Dragon Age The Veilguard are all completely different iterations that have very little similarities between each other than, where the world takes place. That's essentially it. Obviously, they try to maintain characters between the games, but up until recently, world states stopped being a thing with Dragon Age the Veilguard, and they just don't care, right? So I can see the difference in ideologies, and I can see why they may feel like the redheaded stepchild, but if you feel that way, chances are you are the reason why that's happening in the first place. So then it sure seems like the sun is setting on Dragon Age, with Veilguard falling short of expectations after years of development, EA seemingly learning exactly the wrong lessons and sweeping layoffs, including senior talent. I'm not holding my breath for the future. In my view, Veilguard was a semi-decent action RPG with a fumbled story, which just wasn't enough. Again, if you think Veilguard was a semi-decent action RPG, just the words of semi-decent tells me everything that I need to know about you and Dragon Age Veilguard. We know that the game was absolute garbage, right? If you think that was a semi-decent action RPG, you haven't been playing enough action RPGs. David Gaider, who authored this series but left BioWare in 2016 after Dragon Age Inquisition, has revealed 2 truths. The first, not so shocking one, is that EA didn't really know what to do with Dragon Age, something you can glean from context. The second, more shocking one, is that BioWare was completely split down the middle circa 2010 to 2016, divided into 2 studios that, according to him, kind of resented each other. And you know what's funny? When the Dragon Age the Veilguard issue really started to take off, and people were like, hey, if Veilguard is like this, what does this mean for the upcoming Mass Effect? Is it going to be the same? Are you going to subvert expectations? Are you going to change up the graphical style? Are you going to change up everything so much to the point where you're not even going to be able to notice it? And immediately, the team over at Mass Effect, they came out and they made a statement basically damning Dragon Age the Veilguard, in the sense that they said, no, we're not going to go down that route. We're not going to go down the Veilguard route. We're not going to go down the Veilguard graphical route. We're not doing any of that. They came out and they said, we are not doing anything remotely related to Dragon Age the Veilguard, and the next Mass Effect game is going to at least look like a Mass Effect game. So the fact that they came out and said it kind of leads credence to this particular rumor about the 2 teams being against each other ideologically. In a Blue Sky post, Gaider explains that after Dragon Age Inquisition left him feeling exhausted, he joined the new project that the former Mass Effect team in Edmonton was cooking up, the one that became Anthem. That was a mistake. Not Anthem, but rather going from Dragon Age to a Mass Effect team at BioWare. The thing you need to know about BioWare is that for a long time, it was basically 2 teams under one roof. The Dragon Age team and the Mass Effect team, run differently, very different cultures, may as well have been 2 separate studios, and they didn't get along. the company was aware the friction and attempts to fix it had been ongoing for years, mainly by shuffling staff between the teams more often. Yet this didn't really solve things, as I had no idea until I got to the Anthem team, he adds. The team didn't want me there at all. Now, the amazing thing about all this is that I can see this being a thing, right? Again, like I said, anybody who's played Mass Effect and anybody who's played Dragon Age, you can see the difference in ideology very clear as day. You can see it. It almost makes you wonder. Like, I remember people saying, and I think myself included, I was like, how is this the same team? Like, how is this the same studio making these games? Because they are so vastly different. And now you realize why that was possible, because they really weren't the same studio. They really weren't the same team. It's two separate teams that are making two separate video games that are made by two different ideologies, two different cultures, two different everything. And honestly, it's probably a good thing, right? Because that way it's not just one massive echo chamber that is taken over BioWare, although that's exactly what happened over at the Edmonton studio that was involved with Veilguard. The difference, Gaider explains, seems to send me almost to high school in nature. Like BioWare had its own coterie of nerds and jocks, Montags and Copulets, Jets and Sharks. You get the idea. He explains that Anthem had initially been conceptualized as grungy, alien-esque science fiction, and that he had been giving marching orders to turn it into a science fantasy romp. This met the existing team like oil on water. I don't think anyone told the team this, so they thought this change was my doing. I kept getting feedback about how it was too Dragon Age and how everything I wrote or planned was too Dragon Age, yet this was a team where I was required to accept and act on all feedback, so I ended up iterating constantly. He says that it became clear that this team that didn't want to make an RPG, yet they wanted me to wave my magic writing wand and create a BioWare quality story without giving me any of the tools I'd need to actually do that. This illuminates some of Gaider's prior words about BioWare's shifting team culture. Back in 2023, he wrote that the studio had come to quietly resent writers, arriving in a new team only to be forced to accept and act on all feedback, be given orders contrary to their vision, and then made to be the fall guy for those orders. Sure sounds like quiet resentment to me. So, again, Anthem was a mess. We already know that. It's very clear that Anthem was in development hell for a long time, because once we finally got the final product and realized what Anthem was, it was a shell of what it was ever promised to be. Anthem as a concept seemed really cool. Obviously, people called it the Iron Man simulator for a reason, but overall, it seemed like a really cool video game that I really wish was fleshed out in a way that had the BioWare touch, but quite frankly, you can kind of see that it just didn't have it, right? It was missing for some odd reason, and now we kind of have an idea as to why that is. Anthem is a case study that really a lot of development studios should look at as to what not to do when you have a team that used to be known for making unbelievable quality video games, only to find out that they're just incapable of doing that now anymore. It's really quite sad, and they've been having flop after flop after flop, even involving Anthem, Andromeda, and now Dragon Age: The Veilguard. All eyes are going to be on Mass Effect. I can only imagine the level of pressure the Mass Effect team must be under, because they know they got to save the fucking company, essentially. BioWare is going to be screwed if Mass Effect cannot come around and save the day. And considering how Andromeda dropped the ball, I can only imagine now it's going to be worse more than ever. In a quote reply, Gaider theorizes that the disdain for Dragon Age wasn't just siloed into the Mass Effect team, but a general distaste from EA on high. While I was at BioWare, EA always preferred Mass Effect. Straight up, their marketing team liked it more. It was more modern. It had action. They never knew what to do with Dragon Age, and whenever Dragon Age outperformed Mass Effect got the excuses. If you ask me, it was always just shy of the X since Dragon Age Origins. Now, this has to be taken with a grain of salt, but Gaider is a fantastic writer known for authoring one of gaming's best RPG worlds, but he was also severely burned by EA and BioWare, so there's some understandable subjectivity surrounding his words here. So essentially, they're trying to make it seem as if perhaps he has an axe to grind against EA, so maybe he's being a little bit more hyperbolic in the sense with EA, but ultimately, I think what he is saying is relatively true, because you can kind of see his words play out in the actions of the studios and the video games they've been making for the last few years now. So again, guys, Dragon Age flopped. We already know that. Dragon Age as a franchise is pretty much all but dead for the most part, and I think now all eyes are on Mass Effect to see what this upcoming Mass Effect is going to do for gamers. Is this going to be a return to form, or is this going to be the final nail in the coffin for BioWare as a studio? Who really knows, but time is going to tell what's ultimately going to come from this. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you did enjoy it. If you did, consider leaving me a subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to like the video, comment, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Hypnotic out.